Famed artist Annie unveiled a painting titled The One and Only. It was a portrait of her husband, and she declared it wasn't for sale at any price. In front of the cameras, she proclaimed to the world, "He is the one true love of my life." But no one knew it was her way of compensating for betraying me. Every time she cheated, she painted a picture for me. This was the 100th. I let out a bitter laugh, looking at the email in my inbox. "Peter, please reply to confirm your acceptance into the National Advanced Research Lab. If you accept, your current identity will be erased. No one will be able to find you." I calmly replied, confirming my acceptance. My husband, Peter, is my first love, the only true love of my life. Annie gushed to the cameras. When her gaze fell on the subject of the one and only, her eyes softened with such deep affection that reporters and gallery goers alike sighed with envy. Peter and Annie's love story is incredible. I heard Annie asked him out 99 times before he finally said yes. He was totally out of her league. Yeah, and apparently Annie almost died saving Peter once. A love like that, risking life and limb? I want that too. It was true. Back then, I was buried in my studies. Annie pursued me for 3 solid years, and I turned her down 99 times. Her love for me was so persistent that when she asked me out for the 100th time the year we graduated, I finally agreed. After we got together, she became even more intense, practically glued to my side, constantly asking me to marry her. I never said yes until a volunteer trip we took to a remote mountain village. A mudslide hit, and she threw herself over me, shielding me with her body. When we were rescued, I was unharmed. But a piece of rebar from the collapsing structure had pierced her back. The doctor said it missed her heart by millimeters. So, after she recovered, I accepted her proposal. At our wedding, as we exchanged rings and vows, I held her tight. "Annie," I whispered, "if you ever betray our marriage, I will never forgive you." People say marriage is the death of romance, but I never imagined her love for me would fade so quickly. It only lasted 3 years. On her computer, in a chat window, right during a break in the on-screen interview, she'd messaged someone saved as Charming Devil. "Got the protection? I'll head over as soon as this is done." I closed the interview stream, picked up the divorce papers I had ready, read them over one last time to make sure everything was in order, and signed my name. It wasn't until after midnight that Annie finally came home. Seeing me sitting alone on the sofa, lost in thought, she tiptoed over, snuggled into my arms, and softened her voice deliberately. "Honey, I'm sorry. Framing the painting took longer than I thought. Did I wake you? Are you tired? Let's go to bed. Okay?" Her hair was damp, and I could faintly smell the generic hotel shower gel on her. There was a dark mark on her neck. I knew it was a silent taunt from that younger guy from school, David. I got up and walked over to the portrait, carefully tracing the image of myself. The brushstrokes were delicate, my expression natural. It was clear she'd put real effort into it. "Honey, do you like it? This is how I see you, my forever dreamboat," she cooed, hugging me from behind, resting her head on my shoulder, whispering intimately in my ear. A sudden chill ran down my spine. I turned, pulling away from her embrace, and handed her a document. She looked at me, puzzled. "What's this?" I smiled. "A copyright transfer agreement. Since you said these paintings are gifts for me, you might as well transfer the copyrights too. What if you change your mind someday? I wouldn't want to lose out." She playfully tapped my nose, then glanced down at the first page of the agreement. "I've already given you 100 paintings. That's so many." Yeah, from the 1st to the 99th. Every time she was about to go see David, she'd give me a painting as compensation. A way to imply that I was still the only one in her heart. I tortured myself 99 times, just because I wanted to repay her for the 99 times I'd rejected her. And today was the 100th painting. From this day on, there would be no more forgiveness. 100 paintings. Even if we broke up someday, selling these would be enough for me to live on for the rest of my life. Hearing my teasing remark, a flicker of panic crossed Annie's eyes. She quickly looked down as if to hide it, and hastily signed her name without reading. If she'd bothered to look closely, she would have seen the divorce papers underneath. The next morning, I woke up to find Annie in an apron, making breakfast, heart-shaped fried eggs, milk warmed to the perfect temperature, and fruit cut into small pieces. Ever since we got together, she'd made every meal herself. She used to joke that she wanted to capture my heart through my stomach so I'd never leave. Annie thoughtfully pulled out my chair. "Honey, it's alumni day at our old school. Want to go back and visit? We can walk down memory lane. Remember all the hoops I jumped through to win you over?" I needed to say goodbye to a professor before I left anyway, so I nodded. She hummed as she packed a bag, carefully putting in my hat and a water bottle she'd filled for me. Back at school, at every spot, she enthusiastically recounted the stories of her pursuit. The diner where she first fell for me, the nights she jogged just a little behind me, even the brand of soda I used to like. She remembered everything. Her attention was on me all day. That evening, we ended up at the auditorium where she'd asked me out for the 100th time. I was overcome with emotion. "You have no idea how thrilled I was back then," she said. "I swore I'd never let go of your hand. Too bad your forever was so short-lived." At the Alumni Night talent show, current students performed with youthful energy. The final act was a poetry reading by a guy in a white suit. He kept glancing our way. I recognized him. It was David, the guy Annie was seeing. I glanced at Annie. The corners of her lips were turned up, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Annie, who usually noticed my every glance, missed me looking at her this time. After the show, Annie, as a distinguished alumna, went on stage for a group photo. She was wearing a white dress and stood in the center, right next to David. From a distance, his suit and her white dress looked like a wedding couple. They smiled at each other as if no one else existed. I blinked back the sting in my eyes and got up to go to the restroom. Outside, I heard a group of guys talking loudly. Was that Annie, the legendary doting wife, presenting the awards tonight? She's gorgeous. I wish I had a woman like that. Her hands are so skilled. Her paintings are amazing. Hey, those hands aren't just good for painting. They're good at other things too. How would you know? You experienced it? I mean, my girlfriend. She's not just a good artist. She's got amazing skills with her hands too. Every time she gets me, kids these days are so open, talking about their private lives in public. When I pushed the door open, I saw David washing his hands. "David, we're pulling an all-nighter gaming tonight. Wanna join?" David glanced at me, raised an eyebrow provocatively, and deliberately spoke louder. "Can't tonight. My girlfriend booked the presidential suite. She said she bought some new gear. She wants to show me. We're gonna go a few rounds tonight. My girl's got needs. You guys won't see me for the next 3 days." With that, he and his friend turned to leave, running right into Annie, who was waiting outside. "Hi, Annie." It seemed like a distant, polite greeting, but the reflection in the mirror clearly showed their hands briefly clasping as they passed each other. I took a breath. When I walked out, Annie came up to me, sighing in relief. "Honey, I've been looking all over for you. I thought you'd disappeared." I studied her eyes, which showed no guilt. What if I really had disappeared? Then I'd search high and low to find you. Too bad some places are impossible to find, no matter how hard you search. Walking home, I stepped in front of her to shield her from a passing bicycle, as she was clearly distracted. It grazed my foot. Annie freaked out, calling a cab in a panic to take me to the hospital. "Doctor, my husband got hurt protecting me. Please be gentle with the ointment." I watched her bustling around, this proud woman, now humbly pleading with the nurse for my sake. My heart ached with a bittersweet feeling. She was so good to me. Why could she still be so intimate with someone else? My eyes suddenly welled up. Annie pulled me into her arms, the pain in her eyes looking genuine. "Honey, does it hurt too much? It's my fault. All my fault for not watching where I was going." I shook my head. "Annie, if you ever stop loving me, can you just tell me directly? How could I ever stop loving you? If I didn't have you, what would be the point of living?" As she spoke, her phone rang. She glanced at me, then stood up and walked to the doorway. A cheerful male voice drifted in faintly. "Annie, I'm here. When are you getting here?" I bought 2 boxes of condoms. If you don't hurry, I'm gonna go play games with my buddies. When Annie returned to the room, her face showed no trace of anything unusual. She looked earnestly into my eyes. Honey, a client just called about the exhibition. Their schedule is tight, so I need to go over there now. You be good and wait for me at the hospital. I'll pick you up and take you home as soon as I'm done. Okay? The little bit of regret that had just started to surface vanished instantly. I clutched at her sleeve, acting unreasonably for the first time. Annie, it hurts. Can you cancel it and stay here with me? A flicker of reluctance crossed her eyes, but in the end, she firmly pried my fingers off, one by one. Be good, listen to me. I'll be back as soon as I can. She hurried off. I pulled the 4-needle out of my hand and limped after her. I watched her car pull up in front of her studio, not a hotel. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I saw her get out of the car. She had changed her clothes. She wore a bunny ear hairpin, and despite the cold winter weather, a miniskirt that showed off her pale legs. She jogged over and leaped into David's arms around the corner. Annie clung to David like a koala, and they kissed passionately, unable to wait. After a moment, David complained, "You said the presidential suite. Why are we in this dump?" Annie playfully kissed his nose. "We've done it in so many places, but never in my studio. Don't you want to? You're so bad. I've got a surprise for you today. I'm going to make you surrender completely." They walked into Annie's studio, still embracing, and I followed close behind. They were in a hurry, not even bothering to close the studio door. Annie took off her coat, revealing a maid outfit underneath. David grabbed one of Annie's portraits of me and threw it on the floor for her to lie on, then leaned over her. "Annie, doing it on this, wouldn't that be thrilling?" He then pointed to the many other portraits of me around the studio. "It's like we're doing it secretly while he's watching, right?" His words were drowned out by suggestive sounds. I stood in the dark hallway, feeling like I was about to collapse. I should have been heartbroken, but I didn't even have the strength to feel sad. Although I already knew Annie had betrayed me, I never imagined they could be this disgusting. After some time, I heard voices from inside again. "Was Annie with that old guy before she came to me? Don't talk about him like that." "Humph. So who do you like more, me or him?" Annie paused for a moment. "Of course I like you more. Why else would I come to you? He's not as good as me in bed, right? He's probably boring. He can't give me pleasure like you do." Tears streamed down my face. My already dead heart still ached intensely. I remembered her wedding vow. "I will love only Peter for my entire life, and never betray him." My mind flashed back to a morning long ago. She had stayed up all night painting, and then held me, her voice muffled. "Honey, if I did something wrong, would you forgive me?" I think that must have been the first time she betrayed me. She was uneasy. That morning, she gave me the first painting. Then came the second, the third. "Annie, I told you. I won't forgive. I can't forgive." I silently turned and went home. I took out all 100 paintings from storage. I once thought they symbolized deep love and commitment. Now they just made me sick. Who knows what they might have done on them? I set fire to all those paintings, including the one and only, which had been appraised as priceless. Then I started packing my bags. Just as the paintings finished burning, Annie came back. She frowned, covering her nose. "What are you burning?" "Just some trash I didn't want and couldn't easily throw out." She glanced over but didn't press further. She came to my side. "Honey, why didn't you tell me you came back on your own?" "I went back to the hospital and couldn't find you." "Don't do that again, okay? I get worried when I can't find you." Maybe it was the intense emotions, but that night, I suddenly had severe stomach cramps. I was rolling on the bed in pain. Annie, who had been beside me before I fell asleep, was gone. I fumbled for my phone and called her. It rang for a long time before someone finally picked up. But it was a man's voice. "Annie's exhausted and asleep. If you have something to say, you can tell me." I silently hung up and, enduring the pain, dialed 911. After the examination, the doctor scolded me. "Don't you know you have stomach problems? Why would you take so much irritating medication?" I hadn't taken any medication that night. If I had ingested something that irritated my stomach, the only possibility was the glass of milk Annie had given me before bed. The next day, outside the OB/GYN clinic, I ran into David. He was on the phone, smiling. "I'm holding your spot in line. Just park the car and come on up. I'll wait for you in the lobby." After hanging up, he saw me and walked straight over. "You're Peter, right? Annie's mentioned you." He smugly waved the appointment slip in his hand and gave me a taunting smile. "Annie's pregnant. It's mine. She said if it's a girl, she'll name her Joy, so she'll always be happy. If it's a boy, Ethan, for smart and wise." Those were the names we had carefully chosen when we dreamed about our future children. I couldn't believe she'd just give them to someone else's child. Everyone says Annie loves you so much, but I know it's all for show. The one she truly loves is me. You didn't know, did you? To go on dates with me, she gave you spiked milk. She says you're boring, only know one old-fashioned position, and can't give her real pleasure. She says only with me can she find happiness and relax. Now she's carrying the fruit of our love. If you know what's good for you, get lost. Listening to his taunts, emotions churned inside me. I couldn't believe there were people in the world who were proud of being the other man, knowingly. I was about to leave when he grabbed me, his face suddenly taking on a pitiful expression. "Peter, I didn't mean to bump into you. Please don't be mad." As he spoke, he stumbled backward, and Annie's angry voice came from behind him. "Who do you think you are, bumping into people?" She shoved me hard. Caught off guard, my head slammed into the corner of a table. A sharp pain shot through me and I saw stars. Annie carefully helped David up. When she turned and saw me, her expression froze. "You, what are you doing here?" She took 2 steps towards me, as if to help, but David cried out in pain. "Annie, I think I broke something. I can't move." "Honey, David's situation is urgent. Let me get him settled, and then I'll come be with you. Just wait for me." She hurried David into the doctor's office, not even noticing the blood trickling from my forehead. A doctor bandaged my wound. Walking past the OB/GYN clinic entrance, I saw David carefully supporting Annie. The doctor said the baby's developing well, and also told us not to be so vigorous. In bed next time. By the time I got home, Annie still hadn't returned. A strange number kept sending me messages. Pictures of Annie making soup for David, and a painting she'd done of the 3 of them, titled New Life. As I was leaving with my luggage, I ran into Annie coming home. "Honey, are you going out? I'll give you a ride." Before I could answer, a message came through on her phone. She glanced at it, smiled, then looked up at me. "Something just came up. Work stuff. Can't get away. When you get back, I'll take you to see the fireworks." Just moments before, that strange number had texted, "Peter, I won in the end. Annie said she's putting on a fireworks show to celebrate my birthday." So, the fireworks show was just piggybacking on someone else's celebration. The divorce papers were on the coffee table. If she'd just looked up, she would have seen them. But she was engrossed in her phone the whole time. I took one last look at Annie and turned, walking away without a second thought. I don't want to see the fireworks, and I don't want her anymore. I walked out the door and, from a hidden corner, got into the car that was waiting for me. "From now on, your previous identity will be completely erased. You need to delete your phone number, all social media accounts, everything." Okay. I bent down and started deleting my social media accounts. Suddenly, I saw a friend request on an account I hadn't logged into for ages. On a whim, I accepted it. It must have been David's account. It was filled with posts chronicling his sweet moments with Annie. The day she gave me the first painting, she'd gone on a Ferris wheel with David. They'd shared a deep kiss at the very top. I remembered that day so clearly because it was my birthday. She had felt incredibly guilty for missing it, holding me and whispering over and over in my ear, "Honey, I love you." She was very passionate that night. I thought it was because she loved me deeply. Now I realized it was just psychological compensation for betraying me. The day she gave me the second painting, she'd spent the night camping with David, watching shooting stars, and they'd vowed to never be apart. When she gave me the third painting, She had bought matching rings for David and painted a portrait of him titled Passion. And just recently, he had posted about being with Annie, booking a spot at a fancy postpartum recovery center. According to his social media, over the past year, on my birthdays, our anniversaries, and every holiday, they had been together. I composed myself, deleted my own social media accounts, took out my SIM card, and threw it out the window. The Annie who doted on me, and the Annie who betrayed me to live a life of hedonistic pleasure with David. Which one was her true self? If she didn't love me, why did she do everything for me, never letting me lift a finger around the house? If she didn't love me, why did she risk her life to save me back then, and propose to me over and over? If she didn't love me, why did she dream with me of a future filled with children and grandchildren, and declare to the world that I was her one true love? But if she did love me, how could she so easily juggle two men and get involved with David? Why give me the one and only while giving him passion? Was I, as they say in books, her idealized first love, and David her passionate red rose? And why get pregnant with David's child, giving the names we'd carefully chosen to his baby without a second thought? Perhaps when she loved me, she truly loved me. It's just that people inevitably chase novelty, and hearts are fickle. We set off early. After a long and winding journey, we finally arrived at the research facility in the remote desert just before sunset. We were surrounded by low, dark yellow hills. The car jolted and bumped along the rough terrain. When I got out, I felt nauseous. You okay? Need some water? I looked up and saw a pretty face. Even in loose, oversized work overalls, her clean, bright aura couldn't be hidden. I didn't refuse her kindness. I took the water she offered. Thanks. I'm Fiona, head of the materials team. Based on your specialty, you should be in my group. After introductions, Fiona spent half a day showing us around the facility. The next morning, we all dove into our respective labs. For years, I'd worked on the front lines in research institutes. Annie had complained to me more than once. I really don't get you. You earn so little, not even enough for one of my paintings. What's the point of slogging away there every day? She didn't understand. This was my childhood dream. I'd had chances to join top secret labs before, but I gave them up for Annie. Now, without Annie, I could pursue my dream. I was incredibly grateful for my persistence over the years. My lab skills were now exceptionally sharp. Fiona was very impressed with my insights and practical skills. I thought we were getting just a pretty face, but you're the real deal. Amazing. Working from early morning till late at night, time flew by, and life felt incredibly fulfilling. It was a month later when I saw Annie again. To ensure the well-being of the research staff, the facility was equipped with a TV and newspapers. One day during lunch, the cafeteria TV was showing news about Annie's art exhibition. I hadn't seen her for a month. She looked haggard, her clothes no longer meticulously coordinated. She had truly become the disheveled artist I used to joke about. She stared into the camera, her eyes filled with longing. This exhibition is dedicated to my husband. All the paintings feature him. I've made a terrible mistake, and I can't find him anywhere. If anyone has any information about his whereabouts, I'm willing to offer a generous reward. The camera panned across all the exhibited paintings. Me sitting, standing, walking, every single one was of me. Colleagues around me were discussing it. I heard this Annie is crazy about her husband. Chased him for 3 years, asked him out 99 times, and even after marriage, she's always showing off their love. But her husband is super low-key. Not many people have seen him. I really want to see what he looks like to make a woman so devoted. If I had a woman like that, I'd forgive her even if she made a huge mistake. Why can't I find someone that devoted? But hey, doesn't the guy in her paintings look a bit familiar? Like we've seen him somewhere. They all turned to look at me. Peter, that's not you, is it? You're not Annie's mysterious husband, are you? Yeah, you both graduated from the same school and you have the same name. I glanced at Annie on the TV, then calmly shook my head. It's just a coincidence. There are plenty of people with the same name in the world. If I were really her husband, would I be out here roughing it? Their doubts dispelled, everyone went back to their conversations. Only Fiona gave me a thoughtful look and put a chicken leg on my plate. Eat up. You've lost weight recently from all the hard work. In the desert winter, the cold was bone-chilling, and the wind and sand were so strong it was hard to stay on your feet. After working non-stop for over 10 days, I finally collapsed. The illness hit hard and fast, not just stomach pain, but my whole body ached, and I had a high fever. For safety, the research facility arranged to send me to the nearest hospital, and Fiona accompanied me. After an examination, they said I had acute appendicitis and needed surgery as soon as possible. Fiona kept reassuring me, "It's okay. It's just a minor surgery. You'll be fine soon." She tried to look calm, but her trembling hands betrayed her nervousness. I smiled to reassure her. "Yeah, I'll be fine. The experiment isn't finished yet." The surgery was successful. When the anesthesia wore off and I woke up, the young nurse adjusting my foredrip teased me with a smile. "Your girlfriend is so good to you. While you were in surgery, she was out here praying to everyone, Buddha, the Jade Emperor, God, you name it, begging for your surgery to go well." Fiona was a staunch realist. I never thought she'd resort to praying to non-existent deities for my minor surgery. We'd been working closely together for 6 months. I knew how she felt about me, but after one failed marriage, I really didn't want to waste any more time on relationships. "She's not my girlfriend, just a colleague." Fiona walked in just then. A flicker of disappointment crossed her eyes, but she quickly acted nonchalant and asked the nurse about my post-op care. After the nurse left, I gently tried to turn down her attentiveness. "Fiona, you can just hire an aide to help me. You don't need to waste your time here." She looked at me frankly. "Peter, liking you is my business. You don't need to feel burdened by it. Even if we can't be a couple, we're still colleagues, with a solid comrades-in-arms friendship. So, it's perfectly natural for me to take care of you." I couldn't refuse, so I just let her fuss over me. That evening, an unexpected visitor showed up in my hospital room. "Annie. Honey, I finally found you." Annie looked travel-worn, with dark circles under her eyes and messy hair. Her gaze towards me was a mixture of overjoyed relief at finding me and a nervous apprehension, like someone returning home after a long, uncertain journey. "How did you find me here?" "After I was hospitalized, one of Annie's die-hard fans recognized me and sent my photo to her. Seeing me pale and lying in bed, her face filled with distress. "Does it hurt a lot?" "The conditions here are too poor. I'll arrange for us to go home for treatment right now." I too had once deeply loved this woman. That's why, during the period she gave me those 99 paintings, I'd spent countless sleepless nights torturing myself, wondering if I wasn't good enough to keep her. I had also tried, time and again, to convince myself to forgive her, to give her a chance to start over, but she never cherished it. Now those heart-wrenching feelings had faded. I looked at her calmly. "Annie, it's fine here. I'm staying put." She grew anxious, trying to persuade me while instructing someone to pack my things. "Don't be stubborn. I'm just thinking about your health. Annie, we're divorced, so you have no right to interfere in my affairs." Annie froze, stunned. The anxiety she'd felt since seeing me finally settled. Sooner or later, she had to face the past. "Honey, I don't agree to the divorce. If I don't agree, it doesn't count. You're still my husband." I looked her straight in the eye. "Annie, you signed the divorce papers. That agreement is legally binding." Annie looked incredulous. She gripped my hand tightly, pulled out her phone, and showed me the paintings she'd done of me over the past 6 months. "Honey, I miss you so much. These past months, thinking of you is the only thing that's kept me going. If you don't want me anymore, what will I do?" "David, don't you still have him?" Annie's expression froze. She hastily turned her head away, denying it. "Who's he?" "We're just old schoolmates, nothing more. I saw you with my own eyes, in the studio on my paintings." I took out my phone and played the recording from that night. Their conversation echoed in the quiet room. "Was Annie with that old guy before she came to me?" "Don't talk about him like that." "Humph. So who do you like more, me or him?" "Of course I like you more. Why else would I come to you? He's not as good as me in bed, right? Can't last as long? He's probably boring. He can't give me pleasure like you do." Annie's eyes were wide with shock. She mumbled, "You knew all along." Back then, it was excruciatingly painful. Listening to it now, I felt surprisingly calm. "So, this is what it feels like not to love someone anymore. What about your child? Go back and take care of your child." Annie closed her eyes in pain, her voice hoarse. "I won't see him again. I made it clear to him. I was wrong before. I couldn't resist temptation and I betrayed our relationship. The baby, I didn't keep it. I'll never see him again. Peter, I was wrong. Can you give me a chance to make it up to you?" She wept, full of remorse. Seeing me unmoved, she couldn't help but try to defend herself. "Peter, I chased you for 3 years, asked you out 99 times, proposed so many times. I was willing to die to save you. I love you so much. Why are you so heartless? Why won't you give me a chance to make amends?" I did, not just once but many times, remembering how, after every betrayal, she would come home, feigning deep affection, giving me a painting she thought was just a perfunctory gesture. My heart still ached for the me I was back then. One painting for every betrayal. I gave you 99 chances, but you never once turned back. Annie, you always brought up how I rejected you 99 times. Well, now I've given you 99 chances. We're even. We're square. After that, Annie was quiet for a long time. She no longer approached me directly, but her presence was everywhere around me. When I was asleep, she would come and silently warm my medicine bottle with her hands. The meals the nurse brought were always the flavors I'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. If I woke up in the middle of the night, her shadow would often be on the window outside. But what did it matter? The past couldn't be brought back. It wasn't until Fiona, who had been urgently recalled to the research base, returned that Annie finally lost her composure. Seeing Fiona sitting beside me, both of us engrossed in checking experimental data, an unprecedented sense of crisis rose within her. She knew Peter was good-looking, had a good personality, and most importantly, was soft-hearted. So, she was convinced that if she was as persistent as she had been in college, Peter would surely be moved and take her back. But she hadn't realized there was such a strong competitor by his side. The day I was discharged from the hospital, Annie appeared before me, her eyes full of reluctance to let me go. "Peter, I know I was wrong. Please don't leave me. You love research. I'll support you in your career. This doesn't have to affect our relationship. I'll wait for you to come back." I looked at her and shook my head. "Annie, we've known each other for a long time. Let's part on good terms." She was about to persist when suddenly a crazed man rushed out from the side, lunging at me with a knife. "Peter, my life is miserable. Why should you be happy? Let's go to hell together." Both Annie and Fiona lunged towards me simultaneously. Fiona tackled me, rolling us to the side, while Annie threw herself in front of where I had been standing. She let out a muffled groan, looked down at the knife embedded in her abdomen, then looked at me. "Peter, you're okay. That's good." With that, she slowly collapsed. The crazed man cradled Annie, screaming, "Annie, why would you take a knife for him? He doesn't want you anymore. Why are you still so desperate to get hurt for him? Annie, I love you so much. Why don't you ever look at me?" David's face, under his messy hair, was revealed. It had only been 6 months, but the once vibrant young man now looked lifeless. Police officers came and restrained him. Paramedics methodically lifted Annie and rushed her into the emergency room. He struggled, wailing, "Annie, wake up. I was wrong. I'll never bother you again." This incident delayed my return to the research base. Annie was injured for me, and she had no family or friends here. I had no choice but to stay. The surgery was successful. After her wound was stitched up, Annie slowly regained consciousness. She was thrilled to see me. "Peter, I knew you wouldn't abandon me," perhaps because I was by her side. Annie, despite her injury, was in good spirits. While I was picking up medication, an officer approached me and said David wanted to see me. I thought about it and decided to go see him. I sat across from him. His face no longer held its former arrogance and confident swagger. His eyes were like stagnant water, only showing a flicker of life when Annie was mentioned. Is she okay? Yes, she's woken up. He leaned back against the chair as if a heavy burden had been lifted, a look of resignation in his eyes when he looked at me. Peter, I really envy you. Annie is so talented, yet she's willing to humble herself for you. I fell for her the first time I saw her at a lecture. I thought, why can't I have such a wonderful woman? Back then, I was determined to win her over. I clearly succeeded. She lied to you for me time and again, abandoned you for me. But why, after you left, did she seem like a completely different person? She got rid of our baby, took back everything she'd given me, and cut off all contact. She locked herself in her studio all day, masochistically painting pictures of you. She said the person she truly loved was always you, that I was just a plaything, just a toy. As he spoke, tears streamed down his face like broken pearls. Back in the hospital room, I looked at Annie's smile. Let's talk. Annie's eyes immediately dimmed. She stammered, I admit I didn't handle my feelings well before. I couldn't resist temptation and I betrayed you, betrayed our relationship. I was terribly wrong. Can you give me one more chance? She pleaded incoherently, trying to salvage the relationship. I looked at her calmly. Annie, you're just unwilling to accept it. You're unwilling to accept that you invested so much time and genuine feeling in me. Unwilling to accept the insecurity you felt in this relationship. You want to be in control. You want someone to unconditionally adore and admire you, to fill some void in your heart. Your affair with David was out of this unwillingness, and your coming all this way to find me now is also because of it. You're unwilling to accept that I left first. Unwilling to accept that you once risked your life to save me, yet I left you without a moment's hesitation. You want to see me suffer, see me unwilling, see me fall apart over you. As I spoke, Annie gradually calmed down. Isn't it true? Our being together was all because I forced it. You were always so indifferent. You married me to repay me for saving your life. You never got jealous. Sometimes I even wondered if you ever loved me at all. I gave a sarcastic curl of my lip, forcing back the tears welling in my eyes. So that's what you thought. If I truly had no feelings for you, I wouldn't have accepted your confession. I wouldn't have accepted your proposal. And I certainly wouldn't have given up the dream I'd pursued for over 30 years just to be with you. Nor would I have tortured myself repeatedly after discovering your affairs, driving myself into depression. I'm not good with sweet talk, but I was the one who carefully chose and ironed your outfits every day. I was the one who regularly restocked your paints and supplies in your studio. I was the one who personally handled all the social obligations with your parents and relatives. Annie, if that's not love, then you tell me what is. Annie sat stunned, then covered her face, her shoulders trembling for a long time. Peter, I was wrong. Can you forgive me this time? I looked at her. At our wedding, I said in my vows, if you dare betray our marriage, I will never forgive you. The day Annie was discharged, I came to say goodbye. Peter, are you sure you won't reconsider? You don't have to give me an answer right now. I'll wait for you to come back. I smiled at her and held out something to her. I left in such a hurry before. I forgot to return this to you. In Annie's palm lay my wedding ring. I don't have time to think about relationships right now. All my energy is focused on my dream. Before I agreed to be with you, I always wanted to be a scientist, to use what I've learned to contribute to the country. Your appearance just stopped me from chasing that dream. Now that I'm finally close to it, I don't want to waste any more time or life. Annie left. Her figure gradually disappeared into the vast expanse of the desert. Fiona had come up behind me at some point. Have you really let go? You can see she truly regrets it. If you dedicate yourself to this research, it'll be at least 10 years. 10 years from now, will you regret the choice you made today? I lifted my feet and walked resolutely towards the research base. No regrets, because her fleeting affection can't compare to my vast dreams. Famed artist Annie unveiled a painting titled The One and Only. It was a portrait of her husband, and she declared it wasn't for sale at any price. In front of the cameras, she proclaimed to the world, "He is the one true love of my life." But no one knew it was her way of compensating for betraying me. Every time she cheated, she painted a picture for me. This was the 100th. I let out a bitter laugh, looking at the email in my inbox. Peter, please reply to confirm your acceptance into the National Advanced Research Lab. If you accept, your current identity will be erased. No one will be able to find you. I calmly replied, confirmed,